It happened over lasagna. A Thursday night dinner, supposedly just us, as my father put it. No cousins, no neighbors, no excuses. He had called it a tradition. Our old family table, his best attempt at pretending things were normal. It was my brother Evan who said it. He always did, didn't he? The first slice of sarcasm laced with a memory that never quite matched mine. Don't get all emotional, Emma. You've always been dramatic. That's why she left, remember? A fork scraped a plate. Someone chuckled. I didn't ask who. I just watched the steam rise from my wine glass like it was more real than the people around me. I didn't flinch, not externally, but my fingers stopped moving. I pressed the pad of my thumb into the curve of my fork's handle and said nothing. My name is Emma Carlisle. I'm 31. I'm an editor for a mid-tier publishing house based in upstate New York. I read other people's truths for a living. That night, I realized I had never written my own. Dad refilled his wine glass, sloshing too much into the stemware, as always. Evan's got a point. Your mom, she tried, Em. You just made it hard. You always made it hard. It was said lightly, like we were rehashing the punchline to an old inside joke. Dad? My sister Leah didn't sound angry, just tired. Don't start. But he already had. And the room had already decided I was the storm cloud in a sunny childhood. I smiled, tightly, the kind that stretches your lips but doesn't touch your eyes. I'll help with dessert, I said, and pushed back my chair. In the kitchen, I stood in front of the fridge without opening it. I wasn't thinking about tiramisu. I was counting. 5 years since the last time I'd asked about her. 13 since the last time they'd answered. When I was 8, they told me she'd needed space. When I was 11, they said she wasn't equipped to handle a high-energy child. When I was 14, Dad told me, your mother loved you. She just couldn't deal with everything you were. And I believed it. I believed it when he said I was too loud, too sensitive, too much. I swallowed that identity like cough syrup, bitter but necessary. But that night, in that kitchen, I saw something in the reflection of the microwave door, my own face, blank, backlit by the dining room light, and I realized something simple. If they were lying about this, what else had they rewritten? I stood there longer than I should have, then returned to the table with the dessert. Nobody noticed how quiet I was, or maybe they noticed and didn't care. Dad talked about the mortgage. Evan talked about his new car. Leah showed me photos of her baby, Ava, who looked nothing like any of us and everything like freedom. I smiled through it all. But when I got in my car and drove home, I didn't listen to music. I didn't make a phone call. I didn't cry. I made a list. Things they've said about Mom times, they change the story who benefits from the silence. And at the very bottom, what if I found her? A single thread had pulled loose, and I was ready to unravel the whole thing. I remembered the time Dad slapped my hand away from the phone when I asked to call her on my birthday. I remembered Evan telling me I was the reason Mom was in therapy. I remembered Leah sobbing in the closet, whispering, "Don't say her name. Please, Em, don't make him mad." And suddenly I didn't want apologies. I didn't want closure. I didn't want a reunion. I wanted facts. I wanted proof, and I wanted them cornered by their own words. So I made a quiet, private promise that night. They built a story with me as the villain. I would burn the script and write the truth in ink. The night I came downstairs after a nightmare, I saw her crying on the couch while Dad paced. The next morning, she was gone. No note, just Dad at the table saying I'd scared her off by interrupting. I carried that like a secret bruise. When the teacher asked us to write a paragraph about our moms for Mother's Day, I said mine was on a work trip. When kids asked why I always walked home alone, I said my mom had an early job. When Evan told me, at age 11, that Mom only visited Leah, not me, because she couldn't stand your crying, I believed it. Because that's what happens when you're taught that silence is survival. You swallow truth like broken glass. By the time I was a teenager, I had become the problem before anyone had to say it. I kept my opinions short, my footsteps light, my questions brief. I learned to read Dad's mood like weather. Tight jaw meant thunder. Soft breath meant temporary peace. Evan had a temper that mimicked our father's, and Leah had already mastered the art of disappearing into politeness. Nobody ever said it out loud. Don't bring her up. Don't ask. Don't mention the name that could fracture the illusion. I didn't. For years. I graduated high school with honors and didn't invite them to the ceremony. When Dad found out, he called me vindictive. I moved to New York, told people I was an only child, that my parents were in Florida, retired and boring. And yet, I still kept a box, tucked in the back of my closet, a blurry Polaroid of her holding me at the zoo, a hospital wristband with her name, Margaret Ann Carlisle, a Christmas card from her sister that just said, "Still hoping." When I turned 28, I got a LinkedIn message from an old high school teacher. "Saw your latest piece. Your mom would have been proud." I stared at it for hours. Not would be, not could be, would've. Past tense, like a door had slammed shut that I hadn't even tried to open. That's when I searched the public records. Nothing came up under Margaret Ann Carlisle, but a Margaret Ann Fulton had applied for a small business license in Maine 3 years ago. Children's bookshop, coastal town, no photo, no contact info, just a name. I didn't follow up. Not then. Because part of me, maybe the part that had been blamed too many times, was still afraid that the truth would be worse than the lie. What if she really had left because of me? What if she'd started a new life where I was the villain in every story she told strangers? But after that dinner, I realized I wasn't scared of being the villain anymore. I was tired of being the lie. So I called in a favor from a client, an investigative journalist I'd helped land a memoir deal. "Don't publish anything," I said. "Just tell me if she's alive. Tell me if she remembers me." He found her. 2 weeks later, I got an email, no subject line, just a name in the body. Margaret Ann Fulton, 58, alive. No remarriage, 1 employee, no criminal record. And then, she kept a box, too, with your name on it. That night, I booked a train. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't rehearse the conversation. I didn't even know if I wanted her to be sorry. I just needed the version of the story that hadn't been filtered through guilt. I needed to ask one question out loud. Did you leave me? Or did you escape him? I arrived in Camden, Maine, on a gray morning that smelled like sea salt and paper. The bookstore wasn't hard to find. Quaint, narrow, with a chipped blue awning that read, "Fulton and Finch, Stories for Growing Minds." The window displayed a neat row of illustrated children's books and hand-drawn signs that read, "Author Picks of the Month" in faded marker. It didn't feel like a place that held secrets, but I already knew how well secrets could hide in daylight. I stepped inside. A small bell jingled. She was at the register. Older than I remembered, of course. Grayer hair, soft lines around her mouth, but the same eyes. My eyes. She looked up. Froze. Didn't say anything. I didn't speak either. There was a moment, longer than it should have been, where we just stared at each other like strangers who knew the same dream. Then she said, "Emma." It wasn't a question. "Can we talk?" I asked. She nodded once. "Give me 10 minutes to close." I wandered the store while she turned off lights and flipped the sign to closed. There was something achingly precise about the space. Organized shelves, soft lighting, a single teacup on the counter. Controlled, small, safe. We sat in the back room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and unsold copies of a picture book about a talking fox. She poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "I thought you might come," she said. "I didn't expect it would take this long." I didn't ask how she knew. She'd kept a box. That was enough. "Why did you leave?" I asked, like it was the simplest thing in the world. She took a deep breath, then spoke, not with emotion but precision. "Because I was afraid I'd kill him." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. "I thought I could endure him," she said. "For the kids. For you. But the night you came downstairs, he'd just finished telling me I was worthless, that I was damaging you, that he'd take you from me if I tried to leave, that he'd make you hate me. And when I saw your face, when I saw how scared you were, I realized he already had." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. I wrote everything down. I thought someday, someone might need the truth. Maybe you, maybe Leah. I didn't think Evan would ever believe it. Inside were pages, journals, receipts, photos of bruises, copies of police reports never filed, and letters, unsent, dated, addressed to me. "I never stopped trying to see you," she whispered, "but he told the court I was unstable, threatened to go after custody if I pushed. Your brother backed him up." "Evan?" She nodded. "He was already parroting your father's language. He was 13. He called me weak, said I was abandoning the family, that if I loved you I'd stay and suffer." I felt something inside me twist, not rage, not yet, recognition. I had heard those exact words from Evan's mouth the year I tried to switch schools. "You don't get to walk away from family just because it's hard." I had thought he was repeating Dad. Turns out, he was quoting himself. "They always told me you left because of me," I said. "I know." I believed them. I did too. For a while. We didn't cry. That would have been too easy. Instead, we laid out every piece of evidence like a crime scene reconstruction. Over 2 days, I digitized everything. Documents, letters, voicemails from her lawyer, calendars from the custody fight. I organized them by year, cross-referenced them with family photos and timestamps. I became obsessed with verification, because if I was going to rewrite the story, I needed footnotes. On the 3rd day, I found a folder marked, "For publication, if needed." It was a draft of a memoir she'd started. First person, fragmented, hesitant, titled simply, "Erased." I asked her if she'd let me finish it. She said yes, then paused. "But I need you to understand something, Emma." I looked up. "They'll deny it. They'll twist it. And when the truth is out, they'll come for your name." I didn't hesitate. "They already have." She smiled. It wasn't happy, just relieved. "I'm not trying to ruin them," I said. "I just want it documented, the full version, with dates, with detail, so no one can say I imagined it." "You'll need more than a memoir." "I have more. I'm an editor. I know the process. I'll handle everything, names intact." "And what will you call it?" I looked at the manuscript title. "Erased." "No," I said. "That's not what this is anymore." I reached for a pen and crossed out the word. I wrote a new title. "You told me it was my fault." The hardest part wasn't the truth. It was how easily it fit. Like the final piece of a puzzle that had been sitting upside down for decades. Margaret. Because I had to start thinking of her as a person, not just mom, wasn't broken or fragile or hysterical. She was methodical, clear, relentlessly self-aware, and she remembered everything. She remembered the exact phrasing of the court injunction Evan had helped my father draft. She remembered the way my father would smile in public and press his thumb into her wrist just hard enough to bruise. She remembered the therapy sessions, one of which Dad attended for exactly 11 minutes before calling her emotionally manipulative and walking out. She kept records, not because she planned to publish, but because gaslighting teaches you to build an archive. You learn to keep receipts when your reality is always up for debate, she told me. There was one note in particular I couldn't stop reading. Emma screamed when I left. I could hear her through the walls of the car. I didn't go back. I couldn't. I wanted to. But if I did, I wouldn't have left again. And I would have died in that house, if not by his hand, then by the slow erasure of who I was. I read that line over and over. She wasn't running from me. She was running for me, and I had been weaponized against her. I asked her why she never fought back harder, never told her side. I didn't want to make you choose. I didn't want to give you another story to survive. But I survived his. I know, and I'm sorry. I never thought they'd keep lying after he died. That detail stopped me. He's dead? She nodded. 3 years ago, stroke. Evan didn't tell you? I shook my head. We barely speak unless there's a holiday. That part wasn't new. Our dynamic had always been a performance of family, scheduled texts, forced smiles, carefully staged social media posts. My absence at his wedding had been explained away as a work conflict. What I hadn't known was that the man who shaped all our lives was already gone, and the story about why Mom left, why I'd grown up half-raised by siblings too young and too scared to know better, had continued without pause. It wasn't about protecting him anymore. It was about protecting the lie, because that lie had become their identity. And mine. But I was done rehearsing their version. So I flew back to New York with a hard drive, 2 notebooks, and one question burning in my chest. What would happen if I told the truth? Out loud? I wrote the truth online. Quiet at first. Then it caught fire. Neighbors remembered things they weren't supposed to. Evan sent a cease and desist letter. I posted it, unedited, unredacted, with the caption, "You called it family honor. I call it a threat." The blog crashed. Publishers called. I ignored them. This wasn't a career move. It was confession. It wasn't for applause. It was for every kid who thought being born was something they had to apologize for. I told Margaret what I'd done. She didn't ask me to stop. She only said, "Finish it. Whatever that looks like, finish it." And I knew what that meant. The memoir, with dates, documents, real names, not as revenge, as record. Because the difference between a family and a cult is who gets to speak. And I had been quiet long enough. By the time I started assembling the manuscript, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep it anonymous. Not just because of the names or the specifics, but because anonymity would have meant I still feared them. And I didn't. Not anymore. The structure came easily. Each chapter opened with something my father had said to me, followed by what really happened that week. Each section peeled back the narrative my siblings and I had been force-fed. Chapter 1. You cry too much. That's why she left. Chapter 2. She was never sick. She just wanted attention. Chapter 3. We're better off without her. Each line was followed by proof, court documents, school records, medical receipts that contradicted my father's version of hysteria. A scanned copy of the $5,000 cashier's check Evan had sent our mother in exchange for dropping the custody appeal. I didn't write it with venom. I wrote it like a case file. Each chapter followed a rule. If it couldn't be corroborated, it didn't go in. If it was emotional, it had to be restrained. No rants, no dramatics. Just the slow, quiet erosion of a lie. The title never changed. You told me it was my fault. I hired a lawyer, one who specialized in defamation defense. She read every chapter 3 times. Made one comment, "They'll threaten to sue, but you have the receipts." I submitted the manuscript under my full name, Emma Carlisle. Margaret's real name stayed in too. So did Evan's. So did Leah's. Though I changed 2 minor details at her request. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't malicious either. Just afraid, conditioned, like I had been. Before publication, I emailed both of them. The subject line was simple, "Advance copy attached." In the body, I wrote, "I'm not asking for permission, just letting you know what the truth looks like in daylight." Evan replied within 6 hours, "You're mentally unstable. If you publish this, we're done." We'd already been done. He just hadn't realized it. Leah took longer. She sent a voice memo. Her voice cracked when she said, "I didn't know it was that bad, Emma. I thought she left us." "She didn't," I texted back. "She left him." Silence after that. When the pre-orders launched, I didn't promote it traditionally. No tour, no press, just one post on my blog. The story they told me made me ashamed of who I was. The story I uncovered made me furious at who they were. So here it is, unfiltered, undeniable. I don't need them to agree, I just need it to be public. It sold out the first run in 48 hours. The emails came in waves. A woman from Ohio. "I thought I was crazy for questioning what my father said about my mother." "Thank you." A man from Idaho. "I have a daughter. I hope she finds the courage you did if I ever fail her." A teacher. "We see the quiet kids. We just don't always know what to ask." But the one that stunned me came from a bookstore in Maine. The subject line, "Back order request, 50 copies." Margaret had placed the order herself. She sold out in 4 days. The next week, she restocked. A reporter reached out to Evan for comment. He gave one, short, cold. "My sister's version is her own. I wish her peace." It wasn't a denial, it wasn't an apology. It was the public sound of someone losing control of the narrative. Because that's what it had always been about. Control, not safety, not truth, not unity. Just power disguised as parenthood. I had taken that away from them, not by screaming, not by begging, but by publishing the truth and refusing to flinch when they saw it. And I wasn't done yet. The final chapter of the book ended with a date. February 3rd, 2024, Camden, Maine. I sat across from the woman they called a coward. She handed me the truth, and I made it permanent. The media didn't explode. It hummed. At first, just blogs, then a local radio show, then a segment on NPR titled "Daughters Who Tell, Writing Truth After Silence." They didn't focus on Evan or even on Margaret. They focused on what it meant to rewrite a family narrative in public while everyone was still alive to contest it. That was fine by me. The collapse I needed wasn't viral, it was surgical. Within a month of release, our alma mater rescinded an alumni spotlight on Evan. They cited conflicting public narratives and ongoing ethical concerns. He posted a 3-paragraph rant on LinkedIn. Words like defamation, betrayal, and family first cluttered the screen. The post was taken down within 2 days. I never replied. His clients did, quietly, one by one. Evan ran a boutique PR firm. Image was everything. And when The Cut ran a profile on the rise of confessional daughters, they included a paragraph on me, complete with a side mention of Evan's involvement in suppressing our mother's custody rights. They linked the letter, the real one. His board dropped him within the week. The building lease that bore his name, under review. I didn't dox him. I didn't leak anything. I just answered one journalist's question with 6 words. "Would you like to see the documentation?" Collapse isn't loud when it's orchestrated. It's precise. I didn't attack him in interviews. I just repeated the facts. that he helped draft a letter threatening our mother, that he supported a narrative that painted a terrified woman as hysterical, that he used silence as a shield and benefited from the lie. He emailed me once more. Subject: "You win." No body text. I archived it. Didn't respond. Meanwhile, the book hit the New York Times nonfiction list at number 9. I didn't celebrate. I went back to Maine. The bookstore had a window display, "You told me it was my fault. Signed copies available." Margaret had handwritten notes in the margins of each one. Nothing sentimental, just small annotations. This part was hardest to admit, or Emma got this exactly right. She never came to New York, never did interviews, never wrote a follow-up, but she showed up where it mattered. When a school invited me to speak to teenage girls about reclaiming their voices, she mailed me a necklace, small silver disc, engraved, "Not too much, just enough." It arrived with no note. She knew I'd understand. As for Leah, she didn't thank me, but she started therapy. And she wrote a review of the book under a pseudonym. It's terrifying to realize the lie you were fed was easier to swallow than the truth. This story made me brave enough to sit with both. That was enough. The memoir didn't destroy the family. There was no screaming match, no reunion, no confrontation dinner. They just stopped calling. Dad was already dead. Evan was unraveling his career. Leah was grieving a version of our childhood she finally saw for what it was. And I was no longer a daughter whose silence made everyone else comfortable. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't ashamed anymore either. The version of me that they invented, fragile, loud, needy, she had no place in the story now. She had been replaced by a woman who could speak in public, in print, and in court if necessary, and who understood that the loudest power is often the one spoken calmly. I went back to my job, rejected 2 book deals about healing journeys, told Oprah's team no twice. This wasn't a launch pad, this was a gravestone for the lie, and like all graves, it marked an ending that made room for a different life. The last conversation I ever had with Evan wasn't a conversation, it was a voicemail, 30 seconds. Left at 3:17 a.m. "You torched your own family, Emma. For what? Closure? Applause? You'll regret this. You think people care, but they move on. You'll be alone." I didn't delete it. I added it to the epilogue, labeled "Final Statement from the Architect of the Lie." Because Evan never understood, I didn't want applause, I didn't want revenge, I wanted accountability, and I got it. Not because the world turned on him, but because he had to live in the silence he once weaponized. I gave them everything they always said they wanted: distance, peace, a life without drama. They had it now. No holidays, no texts, no half-hearted birthday posts, just space. And I filled mine with something else. I started a private imprint, small press, focused on memoirs that had been rejected for being too raw, too personal, or too legally risky. I published 3 books in the first year, each one told by someone who had been told to stay quiet. I didn't promote them with ads. I just mailed free copies to family court judges, women's shelters, and college libraries. I called the imprint Fault Line because that's where all the pressure builds, quietly, invisibly, until the ground splits open. Margaret sent a postcard every month, not a letter, just a line or 2. April. Started hiking again, not as fast, but I breathe easier. June. Read your author's new manuscript. Gutted me, in a good way. October. The girl from the grocery store asked if I was the Margaret. I said yes. She hugged me. One day she mailed me a photo. It was me, age 5, asleep on her lap. She wrote on the back, "You were never too much, they were just not enough." That one stayed on my desk. Leah sent me a thank you note 2 years later. It wasn't signed, just typed, folded carefully, with a pressed daisy tucked inside. Evan never reached out again, but a former employee of his did, an anonymous submission, a blog post, titled, "When the Man You Work For Says She's Crazy." I published it, no edits, no names changed, because that was the promise I had made, not just to myself, to every version of me that had been forced to apologize for existing too loudly, asking too many questions, crying when it hurt. They kept the house, the photos, the illusion. I kept the truth, and I put it in hardcover, with an ISBN, on shelves filed under nonfiction beside family psychology. Permanent. Somewhere, I hope a girl like I was, 12, quiet, convinced she's the problem, finds it. And maybe she thinks, I'm not too much. I'm just the only one telling the truth. If she finishes the book, she'll see the dedication. For the daughters they tried to silence. May you speak plainly, publish fully, and never seek permission.